So I have so many childhood memories of growing up in my grandparents' house in Gun Barrel City, Texas, which exists. Look it up. My grandparents lived at the top of this really steep hill, and you could see the Cedar Creek Lake from their house, and the hill dipped down into this dock, and I have so many wonderful memories. This is where I fished for the first time. This is where I learned how to water ski, and my brothers and I would have contests, like how long can you hold your breath, and go into the lake and dig clams out of the mud. And so we'd have a contest. We'd keep piles on the dock of who had the most clams, and we'd watch them spit at each other. This is also the house where I learned how to ride a bike. And my grandfather taught me how to ride a bike. And if you know all the stereotypes about Texan men, then you already know my grandfather, who was appropriately named Al. Stocky, big, muscular dude, like leathery skin, like ex-military. He's got these piercing blue eyes and like a perpetual flat top. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like just never change, just beautiful. I mean, you might cut your hand if you touch it too quickly. And just like so much hair, so much body hair. Like my brothers, and I used to joke that like his chest hair and his back hair and the hair under his armpits would eventually join. It was like growing pools of water. You know? So Al, my grandpa Al, he taught me how to ride a bike, and I was like 5 or 6, and the rule was you leave the driveway, you take a right, you take another right, another right, another right, and then eventually you get home. And so I'm loving this shit. I'm like driving around and around and around and around on my bike over and over again. And then one morning I wake up and I'm feeling adventurous. I'm like, I'm going to shake shit up. I'm going left. So I get to the bottom of the driveway and I take a left and I'm like, adventure is out there. But in my like kid logic brain, the rest of the trip was the same. So I start taking rights on these very long, like windy rural roads, and I get horribly lost. Like I have no idea where I am, and I start bawling, like deep guttural, snotty cries, and eventually like I can't see the road anymore. It's too blurry, so I get off the bike and I start walking it, and this lovely old woman who had been working in her garden, she hears me blubbering. And she goes out to the street, and she leans down. She's like, honey, are you all right? And I was like, no! She's like, where are you supposed to be, hon? And I was like, Grandma and Grandpa's house. She was like, okay, where do they live? I was like, Grandma and Grandpa's house! Like annoyed by what I thought was a really stupid question. And she was like, she smiled, and she's like, all right, well, let's start here. What are their names? Grandma and Grandpa! Like at this point, totally convinced this woman is an idiot, and I'm going to die out here alone. And to her credit, she was very patient. She took my bike, she put it in the trunk of her car, and we got in and just started driving very slowly around the neighborhood and hoping that I would recognize the house. And sure enough, I did. It's a small town. And my parents and my grandparents had just figured out that I was missing. So like they're outside calling my name and they're like, oh, Jesus, like there she is. And like thank the lady. And my grandpa, real stern, like, Christine, you come with me in the house. I was like, okay. I like wipe my tears and we go inside and we sit down on the dining room table, and he doesn't say anything to me yet. He goes to the fridge and opens it and takes out a Dr. Pepper and cracks it and puts it down next to me. And I'm rare treat, you guys. Rare treat. And then he takes a piece of paper and he puts it on the table and grabs a pen and he sits down with me and he draws a square. This is our house. And then he starts drawing lines and labeling them with all the streets. And there was just so much sweetness behind it, which he was kind of almost afraid to reveal. So he was trying to keep the stern face, the Grandpa Al stern face. It's like, you just keep this here map, so now you won't get lost. And, stands up and gives me a little pat on the head. And I never did get lost in his neighborhood again. I went to Denver recently for a cousin's wedding. And it was the first time I'd seen my grandparents and most of the people on my mom's side of the family in over a decade. And I walked into the room, and my grandma was like, Christine! And I came, she's like, oh, you're gorgeous, And I'm like, oh, Grandma, you stop it. You stop it right now. and give her a hug. And then I, she's like holding my face. And I was like, where's Grandpa? And her face fell. And she was like, he's here, but gotta warn you, he's not doing so well. And she walks me to the corner of the room where he was standing. And he looked so much smaller than I remember. And so much more frail. And his eyes were still blue, but they were kind of clouded over. He still had that flat top, though, you guys. It was looking real good. And my grandma says, Al, this is your granddaughter, Christine. And I was like, hey, Grandpa. And I leaned forward and gave him a big hug. And the hug he returned was the kind you get from a stranger who was expecting a handshake. It was short and it was cold. And when I backed off of him, I could see in his face that he knew that he was supposed to know who I was, and the fact that he didn't pained him. And I imagined what it must feel like to know what the word granddaughter means, but to have someone standing in front of you and have no idea who that person is. And the thought pierced me, because I knew that there was no map that I could draw for this man that would help him find his way back. Thank you.